May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Joining me now is Jeff Schemmer. He's the Executive Director of Hamilton County Public Safety Communications. Hi, Jeff.
Hello, how are you doing today?
I'm all right. This is a tough topic to talk about. Your 911 dispatchers are often the very first people to hear someone when they're in distress. And we were just talking, you said you're going to expect to get over 300,000 calls for service this year. Any idea how many of those come in as mental health calls?
Right now, we're figuring in the neighborhood over the course of a year of almost 4,500.
Was that different last year with COVID? Did that impact those numbers at all?
We saw the numbers go up from the year before, and we attributed to the COVID. Uh, a lot of people, what they would normally use for stress release, they were unable to do. They couldn't go out and exercise. They couldn't, go for their walks. Couldn't go play golf and things along that line. So things that we normally take for granted that we kind of look at as recreation versus something that helps us deal with our stress or our mental health was pretty much taken away from us.
So, how are these dispatchers trained to take calls like this? It has to be incredibly stressful on them. How are they trained to talk somebody down who may be in distress?
Well, we start off, our classrooms before they ever touch the floor or ever get on a phone or actually answer a phone, they're going to be about 6 to 8 weeks in the classroom. And we touch a lot of things in that classroom, and one of which is the mental health. We're seeing the mental health aspect of 911 dispatchers becoming more and more relevant for us. And so there's more time spent on that. So outside of what they learn initially in class, where we talk about stress and give them, ideas on how to deal with it and such, we send everybody to a week-long class right after, or not too long after they get hired, for what we call critical incident training. And it helps them to recognize somebody that's in crisis and also gives them some ideas on how they can better take care of themselves.
Yeah, when we talk about your dispatchers, I think a lot of people don't understand that they kind of work in a basement facility and they have really long shifts, 12 hours.
Yes.
So they're not seeing natural light for 12 hours. How do you keep them mentally in a good space during that time and taking these kind of phone calls?
Yeah, it's difficult. We try to keep things light here because everything is so serious most of the time. But there's a lot of things that we've done to try to help them. We want them to be comfortable when they work. We have ergonomic counters so they can stand up if they want to stand up instead of sitting down all the time. We've got a position that actually has a treadmill on it. So, and we've got people that'll get on the treadmill and actually, take calls and do their regular jobs. We've got one that's kind of a stationary bike that fits into a console that some people will ride. So we do a lot of things like that. The dispatchers themselves, they do an incredible job of looking out for each other. We all gain weight because of all the food that everybody brings in. It's like one big family, and everybody literally does look after each other.
You guys have taken some pretty horrible phone calls even here in the last couple of weeks with a suicide outside the Fishers Police Department, the young couple that lost their lives in the car accident on their way to prom. How do you provide closure for your 911 dispatchers who are taking those phone calls?
For a long time, there was no closure for a dispatcher. For literally, they would take the phone call, they would dispatch the units to it, and they immediately would turn around and answer another 911 call. And by the time their shift is up, they've gone through several phone calls and they not really forgot, but they haven't had a chance to deal with it. And we never heard the outcome. Somebody goes to the hospital, we don't know if they make it or not. And now it's getting a lot better with that. We watch our people when it happens and make sure that they're aware that or that we check on them to see if they're okay at that time, but we continue to monitor them afterwards to make sure that it's not something that accumulates later. And we are very fortunate in Hamilton County with the closeness of all the public safety agencies and how we work together, in that a lot of them have debriefing teams. So when an event like that happens, and it's usually the agency that was involved in it, they will have a debriefing for their people that were involved in it, And they always reach out to dispatch and say, we want your dispatchers. They're invited to come to this as well. And so now that helps us get a little bit of that closure as well.
What if that isn't enough? What else do you have to offer them if that's just not enough?
Yeah, we have, obviously, within Hamilton County, we have a lot of resources we can go to. We have EAP available internally. If it goes above that, we have a lot of resources where we can send people to that specialize in this type of situation, because it's public safety, the trauma that we deal with the visual and stuff, it's just a little bit different than normal. And public safety, usually we're kind of hesitant to talk about it to somebody that's not in it, because they may not we don't feel they'll understand it, whether they will or not. So those are some of the things we look at. We've got 2 of our people on staff that are trained in what we call CISM, which is critical incident stress management. So they could act as mediators in a situation that would possibly be able to give those debriefings. Although usually we have somebody other than the agency that's involved in it do it, so somebody from the outside. We're currently in discussions with some mental health professionals about even offering other resources for our people to look at should it continue to escalate.
What should people know who may find themselves in a position someday to call 911 because a loved one is in mental distress? I mean, you're obviously there, but you're prepared for those phone calls.
Yes. And, I think one of the biggest things we hear from callers when they call in is, why are you asking all these questions? And some people think that delays the response. And it doesn't, because once we get your location and we have an idea what's going on, we've already got units responding. It's not that the dispatcher has to hang up the phone, go outside, jump in a vehicle and go. So that information we're asking gives us additional information to provide the responders. It leads us down the path of, if somebody calls in and says, my family member's having difficulty breathing, or I come in, they were unconscious. Those questions lead us into, if we find out, was it a cardiac, exactly what's going on, to where we could potentially give them pre-arrival instructions like CPR.
Anything else you'd like people to know about how your staff is trained, or how you take care of them in terms of mental health there in your building, in your facility?
We put a premium on our training. Even though we talk about that 6 to 8 weeks in the classroom, the overall training for them to complete all their tasks is over a year. And once they're trained, we're not done training them. We continue to send people to training all the time, whether we're bringing in instructors here to train them, whether we're training them internally, or we ship them out to, I shouldn't say ship, but we send them to other agencies to train alongside them, because that gives them the chance to interact with other departments, so they can realize, hey, I'm not in this alone. There's other people in other centers that are experiencing the same things that we are. And they always come back, talk about that. I mean, it's just like, when I look at our center, they'll say, I look at our center and I'm like, oh my gosh, we do so much more for our people than some of the other centers. And we're just really fortunate that we have those resources here in Hamilton County.
Well, your folks are nothing short of heroes. Thank you for all the work that you guys do, and keep it up.
Well, thank you. It was nice talking.